I worked with Kobe Bryant and I built the Black Mamba, Rafael Nadal, Cristiano Ronaldo. I sold my company to Real Madrid in 2014.
I've long been fascinated with how some people perform at a high level in stressful or difficult situations, and other people struggle or get overwhelmed and anxious and can't perform to their potential. Tune in to today's episode where I interview peak performance coach Todd Herman. Now, Todd is a coach, speaker, and author of the best-selling book, The Alter Ego Effect. Now, this book brings together Todd's learnings on how everyone from Olympic athletes to NBA players to Fortune 500 CEOs unlock their true potential. Now, Todd will share how his work can help transform your business and your life to achieve exceptional results.
My best athletes, they would all talk about something like, hey, I've got a persona that I take out there. I've got a character that I step into. And like, wait a second, this is an actual device. When I started my business, I was massively insecure about getting rejected and resistance. And that's not going to serve you when you're trying to get sales or market yourself. Even though I was very good at coaching, I resisted against the marketing and sales side of my business, which I'm sure some people can relate to. The reason I wrote the book was to give people that are trying to pursue ambitious things another tool to help them transform far more quickly. I'll give you a trick that I do with some private clients.
Alrighty, welcome to the podcast. Tony Fraser-Jones here, your host. Really excited today. We've got something a bit special. I've been looking forward to this for a while. We've ditched my good mate and co-host Phil Smith, and we have a special guest today. So my guest is Todd Herman, and Todd's work has been featured in the New York Times and Forbes, and he's worked with some of the most famous athletes, stage performers, and business leaders in the world. I'm really grateful to have Todd with us here today. Todd, welcome. Thank you for taking some time to hang with us today, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a blue collar farm boy, I'm happy to take some of these ideas back to some roots with people who wear boots.
That's right. I love that. Where are you based today, mate? Where are you coming from?
I am at our place in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. New York's been home for since 2007, but we sort of migrated into the mountains to give our kids a bit of a nature-filled life a couple of years back as well. So we swapped the concrete jungle for the pine trees of Western Canada as well.
Lovely. Actually, I grew up on a farm, and I miss our children having the opportunity to get some dirt under the fingernails, as it were.
A good bit of smell of horse shit hitting the olfactory senses. That's why I love taking my kids on walks in Central Park. It's actually not because of the beauty of it. It's because the moment you walk in there, you get horse and carriage, and you get the smell of horses. So,
That's
anyways.
right. That's good fun. Let's start at the start. So, what problem were you trying to solve for people when you actually decided to write the Alter Ego Effect?
So I had been living with that idea for not idea, but even the method for up until that point, about 15 years. And I came into that world of alter egos really by the act of being a practitioner and on the field and working with, I started a peak performance and mental game coaching company in 97, before coaching was an industry and before mental game work was really brought into the masses. And as I started progressing into working with higher and higher quality athletes, this kind of theme kept on coming out that my best athletes that were the most, and when I say best, I mean the ones who consistently performed at their capability, they would all talk about something like, hey, I've got a persona that I take out there. I've got a character that I step into. And again, like I'm I'm in a very, very trusting place because I'm sitting between the 6 inches of your ears and we're having very honest and transparent conversations about what you're really doing, not what you're saying at the press conference, not what you're writing in a book even. Like this is very private stuff. And so persona, character, alter ego, secret identity or whatever, I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. When I played sport, I had an alter ego as well. And when I started my business, I was massively insecure about getting rejected and resistance. And I was very young. So the kind of the fear and the worry or the judgment of, uh, people aren't going to believe me because I look like I'm 12 years old. I've got a baby face and all this. And that's not going to serve you when you're trying to get sales or market yourself or promote whatever. Even though I was very good at coaching, I resisted against the marketing and sales side of my business, which I'm sure some people can relate to because it was my name on the banner. It's basically, even though my company was the Peak Athlete, it was still kind of Todd Herman. So there was a connection there. And then all of a sudden, just a domino clicked in my head. I was like, wait a second, this is an actual device that human beings and a part of the human condition were naturally drawn towards for a variety of different reasons. So the reason I wrote the book was to give people that are trying to pursue ambitious things another tool to help them transform far more quickly. Because when you know how to shift your identity, which is what your behaviors, your attitudes, your beliefs, your habits are all stacked on top of. So you can change a habit out here. Transformation and change might take a long time, or behavior. But when you actually change the way that you see and perceive yourself, all other things change very, very quickly. And so I became known as very much a quick hit artist in sports. So I worked with Kobe Bryant and I built the Black Mamba. So HBO is coming out with a documentary about some of that work that we did together. Rafael Nadal, Cristiano Ronaldo. I sold my company to Real Madrid in 2014. So I've worked with some incredible people, and persona and identity is just a fantastic idea to bring people into to help them move through the very nature of the challenging things that you're trying to do if you're ambitious.
Yeah, and I'd love to dig into identity because it's deep work that I've had to do growing a business
Hmm. Yeah.
and continue to do, and as a father and a husband and the whole thing. So why is changing your identity or why is that important for people when they're looking to do big things?
Can I change the question?
You can do whatever you like, Chief.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. I'm taking over your podcast. I'm gonna no. I think what are some of the traps that the world of self-help, personal development, and even spiritual traditions have given us around the concept of me? So we use language. I mean, language is kind of clumsy sometimes. We use, I am this. I can't do this. This is who I am. Um, and really, when you kind of break down how we actually operate in the world, like the practical nature of how human beings exist, there's no one Tony. There's many versions of you, right? Like the version of you that's going to show up to the podcast to be great at interviewing other people or trying to bring a new idea to your audience. You're going to probably be amplifying curiosity. You're going to be probably amplifying like a bit of more of an educator or that interviewer, and those qualities are going to come out differently. When you're with your kids or when you're a dad or when you're a husband, there's still different traits that are going to be amplified that come out. And so it becomes very useful for the listener to think, okay, so there is no one you. We can't put you underneath a microscope and see that there's one you that's there. Um, we as human beings, we live in contexts. So there's roles that we play. The context of, I can talk to my kids. So someone says, I'm not good at speaking. I can't speak to other people. So I break that down. I go, really? You can't speak to anybody? Like you can't speak to your kids? Like, well, of course I can speak to my kids. Okay, so the just breaking down that language, like, no, you do have speaking skills. It's just that you're saying that you can't speak in front of 200 people or 20 staff members or something like that. So that's a context thing. Point is the trap that we get into is we don't contextualize ourselves. We don't break our worlds down into, okay, what's if if I'm going to be successful in this role of building a successful tradie organization or business, that's right for me. What are some of the traits that I need to build in order to be successful at that? So it becomes far more useful when we look at ourselves this way, and that's really what the alter ego is. I don't build an alter ego for your entire life. That's it, it's not helpful. But what we do is we recognize, say, like, hey, and when you're playing the entrepreneurial hat on, and you and I both know, and the people listening, there's like 62 other hats you have to put on when you become the entrepreneur because there's like me, there's the promoter side of you, there's the salesperson side of you, there's the marketer side of you, there's the operator side of you, there's the fulfillment delivery service side of you, and that's just starting out. But then as you grow and become the builder of an organization, now there's more of a leadership visionary side of you that needs to infuse these skills into other people. So you're transforming constantly And what most people do is they hold on to an old identity. Oh, this is just the way that I am. That's the way that I operate. No, like I need to be involved in everything. That's the way I've always done things. And so these ways that we see ourselves or describe ourselves traps us. And this tool that I try to give people, and again, whether someone uses an alter ego or not, I don't care. The method that I unpack in the book is actually how you use this context of identity and transform more quickly.
Yeah, and it's challenging for a lot of people, and I think for a lot of people listening too, is they uh, have probably never stepped outside the glass, as it were, to look at ourselves
Hmm.
and even understand that we have an identity. Uh, does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah,
And so I guess
absolutely.
that's an early part of the process.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the kind of I'll give you a trick that I do with some private clients, and have done this for a long time. Is let's say you're going through an onboarding process with me. I'll say, hey, can you send me a full um, a full length photo of you standing? You know, I don't care. Like you might already have it in your brand bank or whatever, and they're like, really? Well, what do you mean you want me? I'm like, I don't care if your wife snaps the photo, just send me it. The reason I get it is because I get a life-size cardboard cutout of you. And so if you fly in to meet me in New York City, that is going to be standing in the corner. And the reason that I'm doing that as an exercise is, um, to your point, I want to objectify this guy, Tony. And you and I are going to lean back in our chairs and we're going to look at Tony and I'm going to say, okay, that guy right there, what's the version of him that is needed to be successful for these goals that we just outlined? This transformation that you want to make in your business, what are the qualities, the attributes, the traits he needs? And and just that sort of exercise alone, someone goes, and I'm like, no, just look at that guy. And because I want you to start talking about him in the third person. So there's lots of different studies. I've been doing this for a long time. It's actually the power of using language more appropriately. Um, it's been proven that people who will in there, if you're competing in a marathon or triathlon, instead of you saying, I am strong, I am strong, I am strong, as you're moving through the, you know, um, that wall of the 17th mile sort of thing. If instead you say, Tony is strong or he is strong, and you refer to yourself in the third person, it's been proven that athletes will create more personal bests out of that nuance of language, third person speak, than first person speak.
That's crazy.
I've known that to be true for a really long time. And so I want to use that and employ that when I'm working with a person. And then you go, okay, well, Todd, we just mapped out these goals and thinking about those. Yeah, what does that guy need? Well, he needs to be a better communicator. Well, what do you mean he needs to be a better communicator, Tony? Well, my ability to articulate the plans so that I don't need to execute them all the time or jump in on these things. I need to be better at outlining what does success look like to my team so that they can build the things without me interrupting, or our projects take longer because we didn't inspire that communication. I'm like, okay, that's a great one. Put it on a sticky note and go paste it on him right now. Even throughout that, I'm saying him. Don't go paste it on yourself. I'm saying go paste it on him. And so all of this, just even this little anecdote, is about giving people some tactical things around how we can start to look at identity and just be a little bit more of an objective observer, or not even judger of ourselves, but be have a little bit different perspective on this guy or this woman who's sitting here trying to do these challenging things of building a business.
And the power in that, well, I guess which is implicit in is that you actually have a choice here, and most people, and we see it with our members a lot. It is an inside out game, but it's understanding that you can actually have some control over how you show up, and I think that's a big aha moment for people, and the alter ego effect and all the work around it. That's a real gift of that work.
Yeah. And the thing that goes along with this, Tony, is the realization that the version of you that's sitting here right now, listening, driving in your truck on the way to a job, or whatever activity you might be doing, you've really practiced yourself into this guy, this girl. It's not the quote real version of you, because that person, that thing, that identity, it's not. There's nothing that's written in stone about what we're meant to be. We've practiced these things. I've practiced this attitude of being confrontational, let's say. Is that really you? You've built up that skill, and it can be very helpful. And that's probably typically why we end up, exhibiting some of these traits, is because it served us in some way. And then we reinforced it, and then we say, well, that's just who I am. That's who I am. Like, take it or leave it, buddy. Take it or leave it. That's just how I'm built. It's like, no, there's another opportunity. There's another path for you, another skill that you can build. And then all of a sudden, when you've got another valuable skill, now you become more what? Valuable. And the key to life, that as an observer and being around extraordinary performers and coaching, and then having some incredible peers as well, is the ones who win are the ones who have the most valuable skills. Not the most skills, the most valuable skills.
Yeah, this is critical as you grow your business too, because the skills demanded of you become different, and so you do need to step into new identities, and that's why we see a lot of people contracting and trading business owners. Maybe they get stuck at 5 guys, or 10 or 20 or 30 or 50, wherever it is, because the context is asking something different of them, and it's asking them to step into a new identity or a new set of skills, to the next level, which is super exciting. So we've talked about this alter ego. Can you just describe what the concept is, and what it's all about?
Yeah. So the word alone was first coined by Cicero in 44 BC in a letter to a friend. So Cicero, very famous Roman statesman and philosopher, and the root of the term means the other eye, or trusted friend within. So you and I both know the power of having mentors and coaches and having peers that've got your back. Like, we know that, just having a great team around us. Like, the better quality people we have around us, then the better I get to be. And then, but we don't think about continuing that concept into our own inner game framework. And so the other I, or trusted friend within. Now, if I start to bring into my own mind some mentors and a better idea of something I can move towards, that's whether it's the idealized version of ourselves. Like, people throw out these terms like be your best self. And it's like, people don't even know what that means. That's my problem with the personal development world, is because very few people have actually spent the time on the field coaching or advising or consulting with people on the realities of transforming themselves. They have a lot of just cliched terms. There's no meat on the bone, so to speak. And that's where the alter ego stuff came from, was like just being there with people, noticing that this concept existed. I discovered it mostly because I was operating across a lot of sports. If I would have just stayed inside of, say, rugby, or if I would have just stayed inside of, ice hockey, I wouldn't have been able to find this. But it was because I was operating across a lot of these different things, that you find that the reason people are gravitating towards this concept and what it's about is because our brain is so visual. 70% of our data, 70% of our brain is dedicated to the visual cortex, or visual processing. Well, if that's true, Tony, that's why, I mean, even when you would talk to people, it's like, hey, like, give people a goal. Hey, when you're mapping out a project, show them what you would like success to look like. Like, grab 3 different websites of what you like, and then show people, show your web designer what you like about them. Great. Oh, you want that. Now I know what you mean. Okay. So visual. Well, the alter ego is just simply you giving your mind a better idea and a better form of what you would like to move towards. So it's the other I, or trusted friend within. And then what I did was I just kept on adding more and more methodology around this concept that just was anchored towards how the brain actually works, and is also just leveraging really strong internal concepts that actually drive motivation and in a human being. For example, one thing that we are driven by is honor. It's one of the things that I think is lost nowadays a bit. Rituals, honoring, like, like whether it's honoring our family or honoring our country or honoring other people, like it's actually the most successful human beings that I get to work with. They're driven by that purpose of honoring something that's typically bigger than them because it brings energy out of you when you're doing something beyond yourself. So one of the things I talk about in the book in one of the later chapters is honoring the idea of that alter ego. Meaning, if I'm going to actually employ in my mind being um, Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the sources of inspiration for my first business alter ego, then what when I say that I am being Super Richard, which was the name I gave myself to kind of get past my insecurities of looking too young, then when I notice that I am not acting in the same confident way that Benjamin Franklin is, I need to, because I bought a pair of non prescription glasses, I need to take off the glasses. I can't wear the cape because I can't say that I'm being Superman when I'm wearing the cape, but I'm not actually living through that same trait. So it creates a nice little switch for me. It's a reset for that ritual. Um, and honoring is a big part of what can drive people to continuously live to this new ideal that they want to be.
Can you talk us through an example of one of the high performer that you've actually worked through with this, and who's created an alter ego to transform their results to operate at the highest level?
The easiest one to talk about because everyone knows would be Kobe Bryant and the Black Mamba. But I'll kind of leave that one because there's enough kind of information out there of me talking about it. But another one would be, a story that I talk about in the book is a gentleman that was in the position where he really wanted to get on stage and speak more. Very insecure. He actually had a large scar on his face that he was very insecure about as well. He's also an immigrant in America, so he had some like issues around looking differently. It wasn't as, say, Anglo-Saxon white as I am. um, so whatever, for whatever reason, and I'm not working with people on their trauma. Like, I mean, in many cases, I think that it's a fool's errand for a lot of people. And it's become such a platitude almost nowadays. Everyone's got PTSD and everyone's got a trauma with something, and it's not to, you know, poo-poo that. You and I were sharing before about I've been very honest and open about some of the things that happened to me as a kid, but it doesn't define me in any way. Anyways, so here he is. He has a goal. He wants to get on stages. He wanted to go and do that, but he wasn't doing it. Or when he did have the opportunity, he was very closed off and he was very small with his energy. So um, in that process of talking this out with him, I just asked him like, what's who or what's something that really inspires you that if you could be more like that, what would that be? Which in the book is like step two, step three of this whole discovery process. And he's like, oh, I love Dwayne the Rock Johnson's character, Big Wave, in the Moana ones. Now, it made sense because my this client was a Pacific Islander, so Big Wave, Pacific Islander. So I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, but what is it about him like that you really like? And he's like, just the big energy, just the big smile. He's big, already. Just he owns the space that he's in. So long story short, that became who he was when he went on stage was Big Wave, and his experience, like many people's experience, was he when he emailed me afterwards the first time he did it, and he was really committed to being Big Wave, that same energy, and he practiced it. He said, I don't even remember what I said. All I know is I got a standing ovation at the very end of it. And I had a whole bunch of people that wanted to join my business, and but I was unconscious. So the fun part for me is I know that that's true for people, and the reason is all the things that I'm trying to give you or anyone else is anything I can do to help you get into a flow state. And being creative, being playful was always that final golden key that would get people into that state. And so it's just a funny occurrence that happens when people pretend to or practice the act of being something or someone else. They get the result that they're looking for, but they also discover more of what they're capable of. And it questions a lot of what they perceive about who they are, which I love.
For the listeners, I guess it's that choosing a different identity, an identity that has the energy and the I guess the passion or the skills to do the
The
job
traits, the qualities
that
that you would really
yeah
like to exhibit.
that you want to exhibit in that situation. And I guess if you're a tradie or a contracting business, I can think of selling is
Hmm.
often a challenge for people because often you're very technically gifted, you're good at projects, project management, all that sort of stuff, but it's a different energy to get out there and really shake the tree and prospect. And so it might be that you effectively put a cape on
Hmm.
and define an identity for yourself, which is a very outgoing, energetic, connecting type person. Uh, and you can access that when you need to. Whereas I know for a lot of our listeners and members, that's a challenge, and it actually holds their growth back, and they get very frustrated, they get extremely frustrated with themselves actually, because they
Yeah.
know what they need to do, they're just finding it difficult to access that energy in themselves.
Well, what's interesting though is the perception that the best salespeople are always the outgoing and gregarious ones is actually a bit of a misnomer. Statistically, the the one quality that the best salespeople do have is that of being competitive and competition. That's actually the one thing. And now competition doesn't have to come in the form of, even looking like Kobe Bryant. Like, so many people can be like, "Oh, I want that same, alter ego." And I'm like, "No, that was specific to him." Plus, it was also specific to the situation that he was going through at that time and why we used the Black Mamba as the source of inspiration for how he needed to show up. Because I came in to work with him when he was going through his uh, criminal or his assault trial in Colorado. That's why I don't talk about it that often because it was the lowest point of his entire career, and I'm not here to hash up that stuff with people or about him. But so, but there's very many different types and forms of being successful at something, and so the very fact that the the tradie or the contractor is very systematic or process driven. Engineers are, by the way, from my experience, I don't have data on it, some of the best entrepreneurs I've ever come across. Because this, it's once you actually get your business off of just the ground, now it becomes how can we build a system? Engineers are good at that process. Now, the nuance in that is, can you pull yourself out of the system? Like, do you always have to make it about you? But I would say, like, just as to encourage the person who, if you already have a bunch of skills around being process driven, translate those into how you sell and then stick to your process and then leverage in good people skills because it's not about the person who talks the most. It's, you just ask really good questions. I know from my experience that going into even a car dealership, someone pumping the brakes right off the bat and saying, before I go and show you anything, what would you use this car for? What would you use? Like, what's your life look like? Okay, so you go to the mountains a lot and you go skiing and you go snowboarding with your kids. Okay, what else? Okay, oh, you go paddleboarding. All right, so you're carrying stuff around. Automatically, he's eliminating a bunch of vehicles off the lot because of just the activity that we do. But do you know how many? Because we just purchased a new vehicle earlier
Yeah,
this
yeah.
spring. There was only one guy who asked questions like that. There's
and and
five
i
others that never.
and I imagine he made the sale.
He 100% he made the sale. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Even though there was actually another vehicle I wanted to buy from someone else, or I wanted a different type of vehicle, but I was like, I'm not really a massive car truck person. I could really care less, frankly. But I was like, no, this vehicle practically does exactly what I need it to do, and yeah, and it was turned out to be a great choice.
Yeah, yeah. So, in terms of the people that we help, how does creating an alter ego help them uh, create better performance? Like, how in a kind of nuts and bolts way?
Well, we've already talked about it. Like one, it helps you to get out of your own way a lot more quickly. So we have a lot of justifications for why we do things because we say,
I'd
oh,
really
this,
like to drill into that those mental roadblocks or hang-ups that people have.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So like there, we say things, well, this is the way that it's always been, as if personality is permanent. Like I said before, you've practiced yourself into it. So practically, how it helps someone is it gives you a new model for instead of just setting goals for yourself. Okay, super important to do that to give yourself direction towards something. What it's also doing is it's saying, okay, when I think about the person that's going to achieve that goal, what's that person look like? And we can add qualities to it because you and I can go after and achieve goals, and we might labor through the process. We might make it hard on ourselves, harder than we need to, and that would resonate with some people who are like, man, like I've achieved some things. I'm like, but man, I seem to have done it the hard way, or it's way been more and more difficult than it needed to be. It's like, okay, but there's another opportunity. Okay, we have this goal that's here of getting our business to what would be a common goal, Tony, of the kind of meat of your audience of what they're trying to hit with their business.
common goal is stop the business being reliant on me, so I can take vacations and holidays and do some fun stuff with my life, have some freedom. Is a
Okay.
very common thing.
Does that equal a certain revenue number as well?
Yeah, so revenue goals vary, but we run a system where we run awards and high level award is to win a black belt, kind of like
Yep.
and so that's $1 million net profit a year.
Okay. So
So that's a good goal.
so in order for me to hit $1 million net profit while working 20 hours a week, because that's another that qualified because I could hit $1 million net profit and I could be working 60 hours a week. But that's so $1 million net profit while working 20 hours a week and taking 1 3-day weekend a month and a 2 week vacation every 6 months. Oh, interesting goal then. Okay. So, and again, because our brain is so teleological, meaning our brain is constantly goal seeking, what we do as human beings, we just don't use it as effectively as we could. We don't color in these goals. We just say them. Oh, yeah, oh, that's exactly what I want. I want $1 million net profit. No, that's not what you want necessarily. You want the $1 million and you want to do it in a certain way. So let's say it's 20 hours a week, $1 million net profit, just that simple one. Well, what would be the skills, the attributes, and traits of a guy or girl who achieves that? So if I'm standing here now and I'm $1 million net profit a year business and I only work 20 hours a week, what would be some of my skills? Probably pretty good at delegating to prevent myself from getting my fingers into the business a lot where I'm checking in on everybody all the time. I'd probably have to have a pretty solid level of trust in the team and trust in what? The processes and systems that we have. Well, that means that I would have to, whether I have the skill of system building or I would have acquired it through another person. So now I'm a better leader. Point being is like when I'm kind of extracting out the qualities of this person, I go, okay, great. Oh, so you're great at delegating. You're you're a confident leader then as well.
You're exceptional at hiring the right people. You're exceptional at coaching people through the challenges they have,
Yeah.
holding
So
people accountable.
if we had 3 to 5 traits, by the way, and the number one most under discussed skill of being a great entrepreneur is that of courage. People don't talk about it enough.
That is so true because fear kills more dreams than failure ever does.
The courage to, if you get intellectually engaged in an idea and you feel it that it's the right thing to do, and then you don't act on these things, you're literally practicing yourself into discouragement. So courage, so courage is always typically always one of those attributes and traits that in the entrepreneurial space, I want to be encouraging people to adopt. So let's say we have these. So we get a list of 3 to 5 of these traits. Then I go, okay, Tony, is there anyone in your world? Um, it could be something that you're inspired by from movies or television or, pop culture, books that you've read, personal life, um, imaginary characters, historical figures that you're inspired by that would have not necessarily all 5 of those things. Because again, my alter ego that I first built in business, Super Richard, was Benjamin Franklin, because I wanted his confidence. The guy had 5 different careers in his
Mm,
life, like
crazy.
successful, world class careers. That takes some serious confidence. By the way, he also had one of the first talked about alter egos in Charles Duguid, because his brother owned a newspaper in Boston and wouldn't let him write for the newspaper, so he created a pen name named Charles Duguid, and he submitted his articles through that pen name, and then became the most widely read writer in America, syndicated across multiple newspapers around the states. So confidence of Benjamin Franklin. I wanted the decisiveness of Superman. Man of action, goes into the phone booth, changes, puts on the cape, decisive. I was indecisive. I needed decisiveness. And I wanted to be more articulate, like Joseph Campbell, one of my heroes, wrote The Power of Myth and invented the hero's journey model. And then ironically, 10 years later, I was on the Joseph Campbell Foundation. I sat on the board for a few years. So those were my sources. I wanted to be more confident, decisive, and articulate. Why? Because I wasn't selling my business. I wasn't marketing and promoting myself. So I built Super Richard to do that. And I hired him to do that. And I've got a pair of glasses, and that was my uniform. So unpacking, like when you think about this goal, where you're trying to go, what's getting in your way, or who would it be that would achieve this with more ease, less resistance, what would be those traits? Anything that inspires you right now. Who already has that? Now, because all I'm trying to do is get you a mental picture of what you're trying to move towards. And for someone listening, it's like, oh, Tony. Tony's actually would be my alter ego, like what the guy has done. And I mean, I would be terrified of being on a podcast.
Perhaps with a slightly bit more hair, but apart from that, we're good. We're good to go.
You never know. Hey, that's a well-shaped chrome dome you
It
got
is,
there,
mate.
Tony.
Yeah, you
You
don't get
know?
this without thinking about a lot of stuff. I tell you. Happy days. So, you've gone through the process of actually creating your alter ego, as it were. Then, how, in a practical sense, on a daily sort of basis or regularly, because this is not a one hit wonder, how do people actually, I guess, tie into this and keep it front of mind when they're faced with that context that they need it?
So start with either a low stakes or a high stakes situation. So going back to the guy who built out Big Wave, right? For him, it was he 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 went and he did it on the biggest stage he was about to go ever speak on, right? So for some people, that necessarily wouldn't be the best way to go about doing it. Um, but he did because he had enough energy and drive and need to go and transform. But again, one of the pillars that sort of sets up my entire world of how I want to work with someone is I want people to adopt a practicing mindset. No, you're going to practice these things. So show up with this identity, if this is the leader that's leading the business, for 5 minutes. Your leadership meeting, your once a week weekly meeting. Show up with that energy. What would that look like? Play that out. While you're in the truck or in the car, like shift. Like, what does that look like? Practice yourself into it, because that's what human beings are very, very good at. We're very good at modeling. We're very good at mimicking. It's just that we have some of these stupid ideas out there that trap us. Things like fake it till you make it. Because people go, oh, is that a bad thing? I'm like, it's not a bad thing unless you all of a sudden make it a bad thing in your head, because you've already practiced yourself into things. If the phrase was, practice it until you make it, practice it until you do it, there'd be a lot less resistance, because people go, yeah, I mean, when you think
That
about
makes
how I
sense, right?
became, yeah, yeah, because when you think about how I became really good at the trades, yeah, I put in the reps. So if this is something that you would really love to achieve, I would really love to have some of these, the quality of being a better communicator, a better leader to other people, better at delegating, better at insert whatever the activity is or the quality is. Well, then let's practice it.
And how simple is that? But it's never really done, right? I mean, I think about some of the challenging situations at a sort of micro level as a business owner. You know, just having sales conversations, dealing with team challenges. That's very confronting for a lot of people. Making decisions around growth. I mean, it's quite hard for a lot of people to make the decision to hire an estimator, an operations director, or buy a new piece of equipment or buy a bigger workshop because they need the space. And they get caught up in the fear and the anxiety and the uncertainty. And so all of these areas are places where you could, create an alter ego and actually practice that. And you don't have to be stuck in the way you were, I think is what's really exciting about that.
Some of the things you just shared, though, like um, there's a great concept that's Jeff Bezos had shared in one of the Amazon annual reports around one-way doors and two-way doors, where he had left New York City and moved to Seattle to start Amazon. And then a friend of his came to him a couple years later and very inspired by the work that he was doing and said, like I have this thing that I'd like to go and do, but if I leave the firm that I'm at and this thing isn't successful, I'm going to lose tenure and I'm going to lose. So he was focused so much on loss. And so Jeff had shared with him the metaphor of one-way doors and two-way doors. And he said, the way that you're making this is you're thinking that this is a one-way door. A one-way door or a one-way decision is if you go through the door, there's no coming back in. There's really very few one-way doors in the world. Coming to the end of a building and then jumping off of the roof and plummeting, that's a one-way door. Like, yeah, that's pretty hard to come back from, depending on its height. But most of the decisions that we have in business or in career building are really two-way doors. It's if you leave the door and you go out and you're like, actually, this really isn't right for me, you can go back in. So yeah, you might lose quote tenure, but what you would have gained is experience. You would have gained bravery and courage and decision making skill, and that would make you more valuable inside of a firm. And then what would happen is you might accelerate your career. So yeah, there might be a couple of people that rose up into like director positions, but you might skate past them because you've got more context and more meat under the or dirt under the fingernails, so to speak.
Yeah.
My point is you had talked about buying an excavator. That's kind of like, I'm not saying that you need to build an alter ego right now to go buy an excavator because
No.
that's a it's a but
Although some people, those sort of things are massively stressful. They're big bottlenecks. There's these big fears around actually making decisions.
yeah. No, I'm not saying to not make decisions. I'm saying that the more that we practice the act of decision making with small things, it makes the bigger things because you're building up a better skill set around and muscle around decisions. And I mean, it's just interesting that you bring up that idea of decision making because my frame to people is because people talk about problems all the time, and I'm like, people really don't have that many problems. They just have decisions that have lingered,
So true.
and you just haven't made a decision on something yet. And decision in its Latin root means the word is decidue, which means to cut away. And so really, what decisions do is they free you up. You, what what human beings have a hard time with is you have no idea what the cost is of holding on to all these decisions over what your life could be or what your business could be if you would just make the decision.
Yeah, opportunity cost is the cost that nobody really understands or
They
thinks about.
don't.
It's
They
it's and
don't.
it's massive. It's
Yeah.
your hopes, your dreams, and your future a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
And that's the art of actually tremendous salesmanship is actually amplifying opportunity cost with people. Like that is a true skill set of the best, you know, salespeople, persuaders, influencers that I've seen is actually painting the picture of, by the way, if you don't do it this way, this is what would happen to your, um, landscaping if you don't put this thing in place right now.
Yeah, this is the experiences that you'll never have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned it before, the fake it till you make it, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit. How do you respond to people who perhaps feel a little bit skeptical about using the alter ego? Perhaps they see it as they're pretending or being inauthentic.
Yeah, I mean, even the term um, inauthentic, like I talk about it in chapter 3 of the book, the difference between a trapped self and a heroic self. And anytime you're pursuing something, you're doing something, you have a behavior where you're trying to impress other people, kind of kowtow to them, please them, whatever it is, that creates what I have found over the years of an experience of feeling trapped. It's like, I wanted to say this, but I didn't because I didn't want to, quote, piss someone off, or I didn't want to, whatever the challenge was. And so this idea of authenticity and authentic, again, these are words that have become far more ubiquitous and commonly used nowadays, as if they're like a badge of honor that someone says, "Oh, but I'm just being authentic," or this is or authenticity. It's like, those two words, Tony, in their root actually are in reference to objects, not subjects. So you and I are subjective. We shape and shift and morph based on our environments. An object, I could say like, hey, is that a is that an authentic Carhartt jacket? Does that Louis Vuitton bag have a certificate of authenticity? Because we can verify if that thing is the thing. But applying it to a human being, like, I want people to experience traits about me. I want to be generous to other people. I like being challenging to other people, just the nature of being a coach. You would have found that as being a great coach is like there's moments where you got to really challenge people. It's like, hey, what you just said, that's bullshit. Yeah, that's not true about you. So when someone says, is this me being authentic or inauthentic? I'll say, were you being inauthentic when you were 5 years old and you were playing house, or you were playing your favorite athlete out in the backyard with your brother? No, you were like, hey, what could I do if I was more like insert name of whoever the superstar is? It's just a way of giving your mind a little bit more freedom to experience some traits and qualities that you have within you that are having a hard time coming out through the current way that you see yourself. So if your pursuit is to allow other people or to allow your team members to experience some really positive qualities about you that just have a hard time getting out sometimes, there's nothing inauthentic in you practicing these things. Nothing.
It's almost more authentic if you want to use that talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the purpose is actually being very intentional. It's like, hey, I've got some patterns. I've got some, triggers or ways that I normally operate. I don't want to, be short. I don't want to be curt. I don't want to be angry. So I'm going to practice the art of being a little more patient, a little more calm in these situations. And my source of inspiration for that is I'm going to be a little more like Dalai Lama or whoever it might be.
Yeah, I could definitely do that with the kids sometimes. And I think just thinking about this as we go, we've talked a lot about business, but most of us with families and communities have challenges in other areas of life,
Yeah.
which are probably just as much as business, sometimes more. And we could use this sort of approach to really turn up as a different version of ourselves in those fields of play as well, which I think is kind of exciting.
I'll give you an example. So like, it's natural to come on a show like this and talk and, relate to people through business. But as someone who's worked with some incredible achievers, a lot of people's sources of frustration are oftentimes like they're already doing really well, like professionally, but it's the home life where they feel they're most challenged. So, um, when our first daughter was coming along in back in 2013, Like, okay, well, this is going to be a new role for me. It's going to be dad. All right. And now I got very fortunate. I had two world-class parents and like won the lottery on that world. And so I was being trying to be very thoughtful about it. Like, who's the guy that I want to be as a dad? And I thought like, okay, so for now 15 years to that point, I was a coach and I'd built businesses and stuff. And as a coach, I'd really developed a challenger personality type persona with clients. When you're working with like big egos, it's kind of helpful to have that. But is that all that I am? I flex that muscle though every day and I do it for hours of the day, right? Like 8, 10 hours. So it'd be very easy for me to believe that I am a challenger persona. But that's not all that I am. Those were practiced qualities in order for me to achieve the things that I was trying to achieve. So I was like, okay, because I've been training people on alter egos for a long time, I'm like, who's my source of inspiration for how I want to be as a dad? Well, I knew it was my own dad, and we're cut quite differently in the way that we would show up. He's a lot more. I'm very extroverted, I'd say. He's a lot more reserved. So my dad, and then over here in North America, Mr. Rogers is very famous. He's become maybe a little bit more well known overseas and stuff as well, you know. But children's entertainer, had a PBS show that was incredible, and I grew up on Mr. Rogers. So Mr. Rogers and my own dad became my sources of inspiration. So I rewatched some Mr. Rogers episodes, Tony, and you know the way that he would come in. So you and I, when we go on stage, it's very helpful to like have your shoulders back and kind of like play big and be confident and all that. Mr. Rogers was different. He wanted to make himself small in front of the kids. So even the rolling of his shoulders, if this is being viewed by other people, so I'm rolling my shoulders together, he would always get down on his knee and he would lean forward and he would have his hands clasped in a certain way to make himself less threatening to a kid. I practiced that. I got why? Because this was an important role for me, being a good dad. And so with my kids, when I'm talking to them, it's very easy to lord over them. Like, no, you come to the table right now, or whatever. And I'm not saying I'm perfect
Yeah,
by
please
any
tell me you've
stretch.
done that occasionally so I don't feel so bad.
Oh, absolutely. That's my point. It's like, no, absolutely. Like, but if I can be this way more often, I can feel like I'm winning because then I'm also honoring, again, going back, I'm honoring the life of my father, and I get to honor the life of someone who impacted me in a big way, Mr. Rogers, and I get to experience them again. And so this stuff is not just reserved for people who are trying to achieve big things in business or sport. It's like, no, this is a great way to play yourself into important other areas of your life. And I think one of the fastest paths to transformation for some people is to use this in their home life. Now, here's what happened, Tony. Because of the practice of being more patient and being more considerate and being more calm, that translated into me being an even better leader. Because you can't all of a sudden bring this energy up to the surface without it starting to um, translate or permeate into other areas of your life at the same time. And then you get to, you're like, oh, I've got another gear that I found. So,
It's killer. And what's really struck me about reading the book, and I've read it a couple of times, and also hearing, through our chat today, is just the fact of practicing this stuff. Like, it's so obvious, but we don't think about the fact we can practice the way we want to become.
yeah,
And how simple a concept is that? It's like most powerful things, they're very simple but seldom done.
yeah.
And so that is an
And the
amazing
great thing
takeaway.
about that, Tony, is you don't need to learn that from me. Like we all know that. Like we've all, whether it's been involved in sports or you've gone through your education of becoming a tradie or the certification or the licensing, like you had to practice certain skills. And there's other even more valuable skills that you can continue to practice that have more to do with leading other people and being more courageous and being more decisive and confident and calming yourself down and being more patient. Like these are all traits that we can practice. What I would encourage people to think about is like start to notice in whether it's in the interviews of because I'm sure typically tradies like sport. So you'll notice a lot more athletes or other people talking about persona, character. Even you'll like I've got clients who will refer to themselves in the third person in interviews as well. And so other people will be like, "Oh, look at that person. It was such a weirdo. He thinks," and I'm like, "No, he's actually just exhibiting something that's just a completely different gear when it comes to mastering your own inner game." So notice it. And when you start to be inspired by something or by someone, log what is it about them? What's the trait that's there? What's the quality that's there? Because that gives you a bit of a thread that you can pull on, say like, oh, I want to bring more of that out of me, because you wouldn't recognize it unless it's something that you would like to exhibit more. So you get these little internal nudges all the time. We just sort of, whether it's dismiss them or we don't amplify them. And there's these little internal nudges that you're getting. So listen to them.
So, Todd, look, I appreciate your time. And how can listeners get in touch with you or get a copy of the book or find out more about your work?
Well, the book is sold, anywhere books are sold, kind of thing. But my home base on the internet is toddherman.me, and links to all my socials, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram, Todd underscore Herman. And I always like it when if you reach out or tag or whatever, and if you share like one of your favorite pops of insight, or even if it's, I know men typically don't like to share as much on social media as if I was doing a podcast with a lot more female listeners. They will, but I don't care if you DM privately. It's always good feedback because I love to find out from people like, hey, what pinged for you? So,
And we'll put put the details in the show notes as well,
yeah,
so people can grab that. But man, like, appreciate your time, love your work. It's been a privilege to chat with you today, and I think that people listening will find this incredibly helpful. I'm just so passionate about seeing people break down those fear barriers, stepping into the potential that they have. Our vision at Profitable Tradie is helping tradies and contractors create the business and the life they never knew possible. Because most people come because they want to get rid of a problem.
yeah,
They want to get out of pain, but they don't realize that there's this whole other world of opportunity and great, brilliant life that they can have when they step into their authentic self, their best self, their true self in a way.
yeah.
And so I think a lot of the work you do helps bridge that gap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you can be led more by vision than by pain, life doesn't
Powerful.
feel like it's just a treadmill that's got a pace on you that is tough to keep up with.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're created for, which is amazing. So thank you, Todd. This has been amazing, and we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Cheers, man. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on being part of a select group of savvy business owners who are taking their businesses to the next level. And to help you on your journey, don't forget to check out our show notes for a copy of our free book, The Profitable Tradie, and other valuable resources. Thanks for being a part of this special group, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Profitable Tradie podcast.